Hey there, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sandy Butchers, and I am super happy that you found this little creative corner of the internet. Here we talk about art, inspiration, techniques, and the stories behind the pieces that I make. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, I'd love for you to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and maybe stick around for a little bit more. While you're here, I'd like to give you all a quick reminder that my Patreon is the place where you'll find exclusive behind-the-scenes footage, extended process videos, and even some free merch as part of your subscription. Think stickers, art prints, or little surprise extras that arrive in your mailbox quarterly. As a bonus, it is the best way to directly support the channel, so I can keep making these videos for you. The links are down below in the description if you want to go and check it out. Alright, with that out of the way, welcome back to another Butcher Shop. Alright, before we really get started, in my previous video I mentioned the importance of key colors. Lo and behold, color.io. It is a free online tool to help you sort out those colors, and it has two options. The first is where you can browse pre-made color palettes. Some are very complex, others contain 5 or 6 colors. It's up to you really. But the feature that I actually really like here is the generator. It's a dangerous word these days because, oh, AI generator, blah blah blah. In any case, what this thing does is you can create your own palettes. So yeah, you generate your own palettes. And you can look at the individual colors and context of the colors that's going to be with them. So you can see the whole context of the thing. You can add or remove colors, but the coolest feature is the palette finder. Add an image and use it to find the elements that you love. So this is exactly what I did for today's illustration. I took a Moroccan kasbah because of all the herbs and spices that color those streets, and created my palette from there before I went to work. So if you want to start making those key colors, but you don't really know where to start, color.io is your best friend, and no, this is very much not sponsored by them. I just figured it was a neat little tool that I could share with you all. Right, let's get into the illustration then. In my previous video, I talked about this ongoing project where I create art based on smells, something I started doing as a way to sort of celebrate the fact that I'm finally able to smell again after more than 20 years. So if you missed the story, don't worry, here's the short of it. When I was a kid, I had medical treatment that accidentally damaged a nerve ending, and I lost my sense of smell because of that. Now, a couple of years ago, so more than 25 years later, my senses or my smell started to get back. And now every time I smell something new, which is crazy because I'm 36 and I'm still experiencing new smells, it feels like this sort of tiny gift to unpack, which is actually very incredible. So I decided, why not make art about it? Capture not just what scent smells like or looks like, but more go in depth on what it feels like. So last time we worked on a piece inspired by vanilla and cream, and today's illustration is all about cinnamon and spices. Cinnamon is such a warm and cozy scent. On one hand, it feels like winter holidays or like baking in the kitchen, but it also reminds me a lot of exotic places and kasbahs, like I used in the color palette earlier in this video. I wanted this piece to reflect that mix of comfort and exotic vibes, because there's warmth and there is a glow in this scent, but there is also a lot of texture and contrast. So that's the base of what I wanted to play with. So to bring that to life, I started with one of my favorite principles when painting digitally. It is letting the brush do the heavy lifting for you. So when you're painting digitally, the brush you choose can really make or break your workflow. So for this cinnamon and spice piece, I specifically chose a brush that adds color variation within each stroke. As always, that means I picked my good old awesome texture brush, because that's the brush I use 99.9% of the time that I work. But that brush just means that even though I'm technically painting with a single color selected, the brush texture automatically shifts slightly in tone and saturation as I go. Now, why is that important? Simply because in real life, nothing is truly one flat color. If you look closely at a cinnamon stick, you'll see tiny variations in hue. You see warmer reds, deeper browns, little flecks of orange, or even a sort of dusty gray. That's like the coating of a cinnamon stick. So by using a brush that has that variation built in, you skip the step of constantly having to switch colors manually, and you end up with a much more natural look. So the important factor here is pressure sensitivity next to that color variation. So these things often go hand in hand. I work on a tablet with pen pressure turned on, which means that the harder I press on my pen, the stronger and more opaque the color strokes become. So light pressure gives me a softer, more transparent layer of color. And that makes it super easy to blend these colors naturally, or to sort of sneak in those subtle shifts without creating obvious and hard edges. And yes, if you've watched my videos before, you know that I'm a huge fan of using a lot of colors that are incredibly close together on the spectrum. To the naked eye, some of them might even look identical. But those tiny nuances are what make an illustration feel alive. So in this piece, you'll see warm browns melting into reddish tones and sort of bronze highlights that almost fade into beige. All of that comes from the brush that I'm using, which is doing a lot of the hard work for me. I can select these different tones from the color variations that are created by the brush. So all these colors relate to each other, and it's fantastic to work with. It saves you so much time, and again, it makes everything so more real, actually, in a way. It's great. Right, I also have to talk about my favorite part of this piece, the dragon scales. So if that sounds like sarcasm, you are probably still new to the channel. Because at this point, everybody knows how much I hate drawing fur or scales. Not because it's difficult, just because it's kind of boring. I will say though that for this illustration, it wasn't as bad, because this was the first time I tried to mix different textures with those scales, or within those scales. For example, the head has a very different setup than the body, and then again different from the arms and legs. So the goal here was to make them read instantly as scales without overloading the painting with too much detail. This is also something that I let my brushes work with, because I am not the artist that is going to draw out each and every individual scale. I much rather create an illusion of scales so that it becomes a texture more than an actual visual representation of dragon skin. So it's that balance between realism and suggestion. And actually this time I didn't hate it as much as I usually do. So that was a good thing. As you've been able to see, I started by laying down a very smooth underpainting, which also immediately blocked out my values. So just the base color and shadows, and the light source, so that everything is immediately clear for me where I'm going to put what. After that, I decided where the scale detail will be most visible. Usually I focus on the spots where light hits directly, or where I want to draw the viewer's attention. So letting the rest sort of fade into softer, less defined shapes. So you can really clearly see that difference between the head and the face, and the rest of his body. Through the amount of detail, I'm pretty much trying to guide your eyes to where I want them to look. Plus it keeps the painting from feeling really heavy or cluttered. When it comes to defining dragon skin, I keep the shadowed areas soft, letting the scales blend back into the body so they're more suggested than painted. Then with lighter parts, I'll gently touch the upper edges of certain scales with highlights. I don't hit every single one. Again, just to suggest the texture and catch that light just in the right places. That's what makes them feel tactile without looking like a sheet of sort of patterned armor. The key here really is restraint. You have to stop yourself from spending too much time on each and every individual scale or detail. You'll give the viewer just enough to believe that the texture is there, but you'll also trigger their imagination to fill in the rest. And that's when the dragon sort of really comes alive. Alright, now let's talk about one of the trickier parts of this piece. I am talking about the folds in the fabric. I'll be honest, I am not the world's biggest fan of drawing fabric folds. I've done it for countless hours with charcoal back when I was still in art school, but it never really got any easier for me. They are complex, they demand a lot of observation, and they have this sneaky way of showing you exactly where your understanding of physics and light could be better. So it's very confronting to work with something like fabric folds. In this illustration, the folds appear mostly in just the dragon's blanket or pillow. And here's where I really have to confess, I don't really like how the part under the rear end of his body turned out. It's one of those, like a thorn in my side, thorn in my eye kind of situation, where no matter how many tweaks I made, it still felt sort of off. But by the time I realized I wasn't happy with it, I was also way too far in the piece to start over with it. So sometimes you just have to roll with it. Not every element of every artwork is going to be your personal masterpiece, and that's okay. It's I say this, doesn't always feel like that though, and I can really imagine people struggling with that. Like, you as an artist strive for perfection. It's just something that you won't always meet. So do the best you can, and deal with what you have at the end. I suck at motivational speeches, obviously, but I do think that's the truth here. Mistakes were made, and I hope to do it better next time. I think that's the takeaway from this bit. That all said, if you want to improve your own fabric folds, here's what I recommend. Start with identifying the light source at first. Folds are just shapes, but they obey the same light rules as everything else. So once you get to understand that, perhaps it makes it a little bit easier. You also want to think about tension points, so where the fabric is being pulled or where it's bunched up, that's where the fold starts, and from there they fan out and sort of fade into where the tension is lowest. It is a logical movement, so it always moves away from tension. So in which direction is it being pulled? In the other direction, your folds are going to be less visible or less obvious. To do that, use contrast to separate those layers of fabric, or to really identify the parts where the fabric goes up and where the fabric goes down. So the deepest parts of the folds will have your darkest shadows, where the peaks or edges of the fabric will obviously catch the most light. And while I'm saying this, looking back, I think that's why we practiced this for hours and hours using charcoal, because the greatest contrast to work with is black and white. So I guess that just makes it a little bit easier. Lastly, something that I can really recommend is observing real life folds. Just sit down, throw a towel over a chair, see how it moves, and just start sketching it out. Scrunch up a piece of fabric, put it on your desk, take a photo if you have to, and use that as your guide. Like, nothing can explain the way folds behave than an actual fold. So really try to use references, create your own references if you have to. It's really not that difficult. Have at it, really. That's the best way to practice. And even if you're like me and it's not your favorite thing to do, practicing this in smaller projects can really make a huge difference. So don't shy away from it. Alright, so now we've gone from soft fabric folds into the exact opposite kind of challenge. In this illustration, there are many contrasts happening, some of them through color, but also a lot of them happen through textures or materials, which means that we end up working with reflections. In this particular piece, I had to paint reflections on both glass and metal, which are two very different beasts. Glass reflections are really all about subtlety. Glass doesn't just reflect, it also bends light. And that means you'll not only see the reflections of nearby objects, it also bends the light through it, which really distorts the shapes and colors behind it. So as a cherry on top, you can also see through it, which means you'll be working with a very different sort of color variation as we do with solid objects. So for the glass in this piece, I used soft, semi-transparent strokes with lighter colors than the surrounding area, making sure to leave a few sharp edge highlights to indicate the surface. So basically the only sharp lines you see are the lines that define the shape of the glass jar. So the outer lines, the sort of the contours. And everything else kind of sort of blends with each other. Oh, and here's a tip, by the way. Avoid making your glass reflections pure white. Slightly tint them with the surrounding color to make them feel more believable. So most of the reflections in the glass jars here are actually a very light tint of yellow and orange to match with that brown background. Metal, on the other hand, is much bolder. It reflects light much more clearly with sharper edges between the light and shadows. So for the metal parts in this piece, I painted strong, high contrast highlights right next to deep shadows, often very much exaggerating the brightness to just make it pop. Metal also tends to pick up the colors of nearby objects, so I made sure to include those tiny little trinkets laying around on that table in those reflections. So there's a flower, there's gemstones, and all those little details surrounding it. This was quite a challenge, but in all honesty, I'm pretty happy with how it all came together. The trick with both really is to keep your edges varied. Not everything should be razor sharp, or it will look unnatural. So mix soft transitions with a few crisp highlights for the best result. And that's it for the journey of this cinnamon and spices piece. From the warm, exotic inspiration to the technical details of brushes, folds, and reflections. I really do hope that this gives you some insight into how I approach different textures and materials in a single artwork. Maybe I've even inspired you to experiment with your own brush settings, or challenge yourself with a tricky element you've been avoiding. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Maybe share it with a friend or two, who knows. If you like more behind the scenes footage, extended tutorials, or even free merch sent right to your door, do check out my Patreon. The link is below in the description. All that said, I thank you very much for watching and spending some time with me. I really can't wait to share the next piece in this scent-inspired series with you. Until then, keep creating, keep experimenting, and keep finding the beauty in the little things.